What does your shirt say?
It says, I voted for Hunter Biden's dad. That's what it says. I like to make my alignments very clear.
Yeah, you're just putting it in everybody's face out there. You're looking for a fight with that shirt.
Nah,
that's almost worse than like a Biden-Harris shirt. You're just looking for a fight.
I believe in the lineage, okay? I believe in the lineage. Okay, they had the Bushes, we deserve the Bidens.
Did you see Hunter Biden called the GOP's bluff with coming in for a hearing?
I did see that, and I thought it was very funny that they didn't accept it. I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, you got to do it behind closed doors. Why? Let's do it out in public. No.
No, Hunter Biden is just too squirrely. He's too good in a debate. He'll hold our senators and congressmen down, and they won't be able to respond to his press tricks.
Yep. Well, they said the Democrats would turn it into a circus, basically. It's like, okay, all right. Yeah, it's our fault.
I don't know, man. I would let's get a few circus Republicans on there. We'll turn it into a real circus. I think if we put Lauren Boebert on there, there's a 50-50 chance she'll just throw a crack rock at him. 50-50 chance. She'd go over the top. She'd use the moment like it was nothing else. I mean, come on. Lauren Boebert gets to interrogate Hunter Biden. That'd be great for her podcast views.
I don't know. She might be on that committee. I don't know. There's like 50 people on the oversight committee, and that's where it's going to be. So your dream may come true.
I think that maybe that's it. They just don't want to see what the crazies would do. They don't want to somehow make Hunter Biden look good by just comparison.
Well, that's the thing. They're saying, okay, you come in privately, do a deposition, then we'll do a public one. But everybody thinks Hunter Biden is some like druggy college dropout. This guy had a problem with drugs for a couple years. He's been sober for 4 years. He's a Yale School graduate. He worked in D.C. as a lawyer at high-end firms. Like, he's gonna come kill it. He's gonna be great.
I think that's probably true, and I also think that they know that this Joe Biden impeachment stuff has no legs. There's a reason they're not pursuing it. There's a reason why Marjorie Taylor Greene is so pissed right now. Is because she knows that they're not going to have to. They're going to have to avoid pursuing it, because if they do pursue it, it's going to fail. They're not going to impeach in the House. They're not going to impeach in the Senate. And there's no way they're going to get what's necessary to impeach, because they don't have any evidence. Yep. They don't have any evidence. It's all hearsay or conjecture. And as long as it's hearsay or conjecture or speculation about, well, he moved money here. Okay, well, him move money here doesn't mean he did anything illegal with the money. There has to be a crime presented somewhere, and there's no crimes presented anywhere. And as long as that's the case, them moving this forward, anybody defending Joe Biden just has to repeat that, and any judge that's going to look at the case is going to come to the same conclusion. And so if the longer they drag this out and the more of a spectacle they make it, the more people are going to follow the story, and the more eyes the eventual no impeachment is going to get.
I agree. They're going to drag this out all the way through the election. They know they have nothing. They're supposedly going to hold an impeachment official vote to open an impeachment inquiry, because Trump set a precedent in 2019 when they first impeached him that unless you have a formal vote to open up an impeachment inquiry, which Nancy Pelosi did not do for like a month, I don't have to respond to anything. And so Biden's like, I'm not responding to anything, and nobody has to testify until you guys do that. But now that they got rid of George Santos, which I can't wait to talk to you about, they have a very slim majority, so they may not even have the votes to open an impeachment inquiry officially.
Even if they were to do the impeachment inquiry, it's all going to end the same way. It's all going to end with no impeachment. It failed. The most they could ever hope to achieve is like keep the question in the air through the election, maybe, and they could try to be like, well, Trump was impeached, but Biden could be impeached. Like, that's the most I could imagine. But it's not. There's nothing they can do to pursue this that isn't either going to make it look like it's just spite-based politics where they want to get Biden impeached because they got Trump impeached, which is how most people are viewing it right now, or it just ends up blowing up in their face. I just don't see any way where they pursue it where it doesn't end with everybody being like, wow, this is a crock of shit. Unless they find some new piece of evidence.
Well, remember, they've only had one hearing for an impeachment inquiry, and they had that Jonathan Turley guy say, I don't think the evidence is there now to move forward with impeachment, their own witness. So that was a total tragedy.
So George Santos, he's croaked. Huh? I saw his last message as he was leaving was, "Who would want to work in there anyway?" Right? He was like, "Oh my God, who would want to work in the cap? These guys are a bunch of these guys suck." You know, that was his last message. His defiant kind of "F you" as he left.
He said, "To hell with this place," I believe is a direct quote, and he stormed off. Well, I'm just curious because when we originally talked about this like 6 months ago, you were a bit doubtful that anything was going to happen, any sort of indictment, any sort of removal from Congress. So are you kind of shocked that they did this, or did you realize it was going to happen after a while?
I just thought about how slim the Republican majority is. I just thought about how common the tendency is right now to kind of just rally around the flag. And that's not only a Republican tendency, but to an extent, that's a Democratic tendency as well. And that's why I really appreciated John Fetterman going on The View and saying Senator Menendez should resign.
Has donated
so that was good.
Are you going to ask IRI?
One second. People donated $5. People are asking me to talk to you about Israel. I'll ask you a question about Israel later. So they even $5.
Don't worry.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought because of that donation.
You said Fetterman was calling for expulsion.
Yeah.
Well.
I just want to. I didn't expect the Republicans not to rally around the flag. And to be fair, there were still like over 200 who still rallied around the flag and refused to vote him out. So the majority of Republicans still voted, and I want to remind people of that. The majority of Republicans still voted to keep him in there, knowing that he was using campaign funds to pay for OnlyFans. Other Republican legislators were saying that they maxed out their credit cards. They're now coming out forward saying that he maxed out their credit cards, donating for his own campaign. He lied about his mom dying on 9/11. He lied about his work history. He lied about his educational background. There's questions about credit card fraud. There's so many different felonies and crimes that he's accused of, all of which he's basically gone through it by basically just posting through it, doing the IRL equivalent of posting through it, just like being very sassy with reporters, which has not worked well when it comes to dealing with his issues, but has been very funny and has been entertaining for me. Oh, this is the thing. That's why I'm saying we need to have like a permanent court jester and give the position to him.
He's a political goldmine for us too. I mean, it's a win-win no matter what happened. They almost didn't kick him out. Today, the leadership came out about an hour before the vote. Mike Johnson, the new speaker, and his lieutenants, and they said we're voting against the expulsion. So there was some last-minute drama, and it was pretty close. It was split like 105 to 115 or whatever.
Do you know what ultimately made them turn against him to allow him to be expelled?
I believe it was the letter from Max Miller about getting ripped off, like you were talking about, misusing the credit
that was
card numbers.
because that dropped at the last moment. That was a very today is when we all found out about that.
Yeah, so Dylan's talked, for my chat, Dylan's talking about this. Representative Max Miller, one of his colleagues, put out an email to everybody in the House and said that I was a victim of George Santos and that he took my credit card number and used it, and my mom too, and supposedly a bunch of other members that didn't say anything. So George Santos ripped off his own members.
He's stealing campaign funds to play for nudes on the internet. He's stealing Republican congressmen's credit cards and maxing them out so that he could go buy more nudes on the internet. It's great. Oh, it's great. I wish we could keep him in there. It's like Mean Girls now. It's fantastic.
Well, I think he'll still have an impact on 2024. I don't think the stink of Santos is going to fade that quickly. So he'll still be around. And plus, the big special election will happen to replace him, like at the beginning of March. So there'll be a lot of eyes on that. And there'll be a lot of mentioning
There's
of
no way
George.
a Republican replaces him.
Well, I'll tell you how it could happen. I mean, yes, Biden won his district by 8 points in 2020, but
he can't run again. Could he run again?
Well, he can. Yeah, of course he can run again, but he's not going to. Here's the thing.
That'd be beautiful. That'd be beautiful.
It would be, but the county chairs of the Democrats and the Republicans in the district get to pick a candidate, and those two people will run. So it's not even going to be a primary. It's going to be like two people selected by the parties. And so I don't think the Republicans will pick George Santos. But Lee Zeldin, the Republican running for governor in 2022, who got pretty close to Kathy Hochul, he won that district by 12 points. So that is a sign that things could go better for a Republican than we would hope. But I think a Democrat's going to win.
Why do you think a Democrat's going to win?
Democrats will win. Well, the energy is on our side. George Santos is a huge energizer for the left. The special elections recently have gone in the Democrats' favor with abortion and such. So I just think that George has sapped the energy out of the GOP in that district. Their heads are hanging low. And so I think Democrats can come in with a lot of energy and excitement.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to follow that up as the Republican. Like, I'm here to bring honor back to our district. Are you gonna use our campaign money for penis pics?
Right. Yeah, like I'm here to make up for the last Republican that was in here that you guys chose. Like, it's kind of a hard argument. Yeah, it's not a great one.
It's not good. It's not good following up on the disaster. George Santos getting out of there, practically losing this vote doesn't really mean anything, though. I mean, it is one vote amongst 15 does mean something, right? But how much does it mean?
What do you mean
really?
One amongst 15?
Well, I mean, there was 15 really radical far right. I don't know if I could say far right people really sunk Kevin McCarthy, and he wasn't amongst that 15. But when we're talking about these slim votes to keep the House majority leader together, do these votes ultimately matter right now?
I think so. Every vote counts. They're down to 221. You need 218 to pass anything. So they had a 4-vote majority. Now they have a 3-vote majority. There's also rumors that other people are leaving. Kevin McCarthy might leave before the end of the year, believe it or not. There's a filing deadline coming up middle of this month, December, for him to indicate if he's going to run for re-election. And there's some articles out there saying he's thinking about leaving. There's another Republican that's leaving at the beginning of next year. So they might be down to a 1-seat majority in come February, March, and that's already difficult to pass anything. And Mike Johnson does have to pass some things, right? The budget's going to expire in January. They just extended it to the middle of January. There are the farm bill. It's this big 5-year bill that determines what we're doing with our farming industry in America. It's like $500 million or $500 billion bill, something like that. And then there's authorizing FISA. I mean, there's a lot of things that they have to deal with. They can't just sit on their hands for the next year. Congress, the House has to do some stuff.
Yeah, it's just so hard, I think, as a Republican to sell your party after the speakership and the disaster of trying to govern or try to do any type of policy implementation when you can't agree on a basic budget, you can't agree on who the speaker is. It just feels like the Republican Party just looks like it's infighting to no end, and that's going to be the speaker's or Mike Johnson's main goal is to not, if they may have to go through another round of speakership votes, which we've already seen some rumblings, and I don't know if you've been paying attention to the things that Lauren Boebert's been saying, the thing Marjorie Taylor Greene's been saying, a thing that a lot of the more fringe far-right congressmen have been saying, and many of them are already upset because Mike Johnson had to do a moment or had to have some moment where he decided look, and this is what every single other speaker is going to have as well, is look, if we want to get anything done, the Democrats control the Senate. We have a Democratic president who has veto power. We only have a very slim majority. We have to agree to some of the Democratic government's proposals. Definitely when they control 2 chambers, we only control 1. And that come to Jesus moment is difficult when you're possessed by the demon named MAGA. When you're possessed, when you can't collaborate in any way, when you can't make those compromises, you're unwilling to. It leads to these delays in coming to a budget because we're playing footsies now with the government shutting down, which is not good for international investment. It's not good for national stability. It's not good for the political health of our country, but it could be politically expedient for the people who are initiating it, because they are reliant on a very fringe base that the majority of people don't agree with, but can continue to donate and get them millions upon millions of dollars in campaign revenue.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right that this may not be the last Speaker of the House for the 118th Congress. We might have a third one. Mike Johnson is going to run into some trouble come January, February, when he's got to extend Nancy Pelosi's budget further or pass a new budget and compromise with the Senate and the White House. I mean, you're right. They only control one lever of power. lever. And so they're in a tough spot, and he is hardcore MAGA. I mean, Mike Johnson is just an NPC, like Chat GPT, AI generated Republican. He is not some amazing negotiator or something. He's going to get walked on by Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer, and even Mitch McConnell. Like, he's fighting them on aid for Israel or aid for Ukraine. And I don't think he's going to win that battle. No. He already made the mistake of tying Israel aid to a domestic policy, and that's not what we want to do. That's a bad precedent. So I think you're right.
I think it's really bad vibes. I really don't like. I don't like it. I don't like the idea of Euro-Atlantic security will only be maintained if we have sufficient border funding. Just like the opposite would be weird. Like, oh, unless you fund my war over here, or unless you fund my aid package here, then we're not going to fund this bridge. We're not going to fund this road. We're not going to fund your local police department until you give Israel enough artillery shells. Like this, I don't like this type of politics. I don't like it. And it seems to be what Mike Johnson is aiming for after making a big stink about the need to separate issues.
Yeah. No, nobody's ever tied international emergency funding to domestic policy, and it's just terrible. He also said he's doing it to have a pay for, so that we can't just spend money and not cut money. But cutting money from the IRS, which is also part of his Israel, the Israel bill that he passed.
Oh yeah, that was a terrible idea. I mean, that's going to be a net negative for the amount of revenue we have in the state. That doesn't help make up for anything. It's just they don't like the IRS. They want to undermine the IRS, and they're trying to use the Israel funding as a means to undermine the IRS.
Yep, 100%. So taking that $14 billion from the IRS is just going to cost us even more billions of dollars. So it doesn't even pay for it. It actually just costs us money. So Mike Johnson just not doing great so far. Not doing great.
No, I don't think so. I heard that they're going to have a vote on December 3rd or 4th on Ukraine aid, on the big package in the 1.6 on the 106. Biden hasn't moved on it. I thought he was going to move on it. I thought we were going to see some move. Yeah, I heard there was going to be a vote in the Senate. But I don't know how it's going to fare in the House, because this needs to be passed soon. And when I say it needs to be passed soon, I mean there are artillery shortages amongst the Ukrainian front line. Right before I left, I was visiting these frontline positions where these artillery men are firing 3 shells a day with these gigantic artillery guns that could be firing much more if they had the shells necessary. And it's hard for any of the military planners to plan if they don't know that they're going to get next day's delivery or next week's delivery. And so they're planning on what they have currently, which is not enough for them to plan wide-spanning operations. So it's unbelievably frustrating, because the majority of people in Congress support it, the majority of Americans support it, the majority of people in the Senate support it, the presidency supports it, the State Department supports it, the majority of American foreign policy experts support it. Everyone supports it, but it's because the Republican majority leader is being held hostage by a group of isolationists, well, semi-isolationists, it depends on the country, but people who use isolationist principles when it's convenient, because they're held hostage by them. There's nothing we can do, at least until they agree to the bundle.
Yeah. Well, this is why people need to pray for Mitch McConnell's health, because he is a huge advocate for passing this $106 billion plan that includes the $60 billion for Ukraine. He's like Ukraine's biggest ally in the Republican Party right now. And we need that man to stay alive so that we can get those funds, because I think he'll fight with Biden and Chuck Schumer, and then it's 2v1 versus the House.
Until next election, when Democrats win every House seat, every Senate seat, and keep the presidency, I do think that having more pro-Ukraine Republicans in these conversations is going to be helpful strategically.
It's the only thing positive about Mitch McConnell. Everything else sucks. But yeah, he's very pro-Ukraine funding, so I think it's a good thing. Do you think we're taking the House? And so, well, let's talk about that. Do you think that we've got the House after everything that's happened now?
I have no clue, man. I think we're still too far out.
Okay.
There's so much that could happen between now and election day, either on the foreign policy front, either on the economic front. If let's say there was some new virus or new economic like catastrophe, or we have no clue. So I don't want to make any predictions this far out because I don't know all the factors that are going to be involved in electing the president. Like a year before election day, how much did we know that COVID was going to play a factor in the 2020 election? We had very little idea.
Right.
So I want to be careful with. I just want to give any prediction I make a big asterisk. So the polling data seems to indicate to me that Biden is facing I'm not going to say an uphill battle, but a tough battle going into 2024. And there's reasons why he could win. There's reasons why he could lose. But when it comes to the Democratic ticket, when it comes to Congress, when it comes to the Senate, things, in my opinion, look a lot more positive. I think that, number one, the special election results have been very good for Democrats. The election results in 2022 were good for a midterm, for a first midterm of any president. I think it was like record setting for the last 30, 40 years. And it was the best results for a first term for a presidency in 30, 40 years. So I thought that was a good sign. The recent special elections saw Democratic victories on big issues like abortion, saw Democratic victories on big issues like marijuana legalization, showed that policy priorities for Democrats were popular, while also having Democrats win in what are traditionally red states like Kentucky, and Democratic governors, popular Democratic governors winning. So I do think that we seem to be outperforming the pollsters slightly. And I do think the polling data seems to indicate that a generic Democrat does perform better than a generic Republican, at least the recent polling data that I saw. Unless you've seen something different, then I'll abide by IRI's political mental genius. But when it comes to the presidency, I'm a lot more reserved, because voting for a congressman, voting for a senator, voting for a party, and voting for somebody who has so much media smog around them, so many rumors and like attention directed towards one person, and so much history, I think it's somewhat different than voting for somebody down the ticket in the local level that we just, we don't know what's going to motivate somebody to vote for the person in a district where he funded like some bridges, but it's like the presidency, I think the presidency I'm less confident in.
I hear you. I think these national polls for Biden are bullshit right now. People aren't paying attention. They only see negative things. Actually, there were 4 national polls that came out this week that had Biden up on Trump, and nobody even noticed, but they were all respectable polls.
Too. It was a few I saw it was like 1 or 2. They were not nonsense polls, and it's part of the reason why it's like so hard for when somebody says, well, "Who do you think is going to win in a year from now?" Like, I don't know what's going to happen in the next year. I don't know what the health of both of the candidates are going to be in the next year. I don't know what the economic status is going to be. I don't know what multiple different foreign policy crises are going to be like in the next year. There's just so much that could introduce itself, and also, like you said, and I do agree with this, people start paying attention the closer you get to election day.
All right. Yeah, I mean, the Republicans are engaged right now. They are less than 50 days away from voting in their primary. They have Iowa coming up here on January 15th. So, like, they are highly engaged right now and paying attention and passionate. Whereas our side is, we got Genocide Joe over here. So it's tough for Joe Biden. But I do think that as we get closer to the election, people will start to see the difference between the two candidates, and Biden will start spending money and all that. So to me, the national polls don't mean shit. Also, historically, like Bill Clinton had similar approval numbers the year before he got reelected. Barack Obama did as well, and he got reelected. And so I'm not very concerned. But the bigger concern is the Senate. That's going to be tough because Joe Manchin is retiring. So we've basically lost that seat. So now we're down to like 50-50. And then we've got to defend some tough races like Sherrod Brown in Ohio, John Tester in Montana. We have Arizona.
John Tester's popular, though.
He is, yeah, he is.
John Tester. So
are you feeling?
I'm confident about Tester, because Tester, all the polling data I see for Tester, like some of it is like he's one of the most popular senators in the country, right?
Right.
And everybody I know from his district in Montana, and I learned a little bit about it when I was working as a political consultant, seems to give me the impression that he has a strong base of support there. Maybe that'll depend on who they run as a candidate against him. It would have to be a really strong candidate. I hear that Sherrod Brown is popular. I don't know enough about Ohio politics to go any further than that. But I'm not just looking, or I think the Democrats should not just look to hold the Senate. We also need to take back the House if we really want to get large change done in the country from the last 4 years where Biden's in office, because the same problems that we're seeing right now are going to continue if we have in fact, let's say a scenario where we take up like 1 or 2 seats in the House. I mean, a 1 Republican majority or 2 Republican majority, we're still going to have all the same problems where nothing's getting done. Even if we have 1 or 2 Democrats, we might run into many of the same issues, because there are going to be Democrats which the Republicans are going to go up to, and they're going to offer everything and a big old bowl of potatoes in order to make sure that they're holding back on certain worker regulations, holding back on this, holding back on that. Definitely when you talk about certain blue dog Democrats in the House, the Blue Dog Coalition. So it's not just a question of holding. I think if we really want to get big priorities through, it's going to be a question about making gains, which I am less confident in.
Really? Well, there's 18 Republicans that represent districts that Biden won, and the maps have been changed because of Supreme Court ruling, like in Alabama. There's that extra seat now. So just alone on the changes to the maps, it seems like we are favored to win. So I'm pretty confident about the House, and especially with all the chaos and the first time a speaker's ever been kicked out and all this nonsense. I'm hearing some Republicans like Ken Buck from Colorado, who's part of the Freedom Caucus, who's not running for re-election. He thinks MAGA is going to have a reckoning, and we're going to see a lot of these MAGA people get kicked out, like Lauren Boebert, who had the closest House race in 2022.
Crazy. I mean, it was really, really close. She almost lost, and nobody really expected it to be that close. Nobody.
538 had her chances of winning at 95%.
It's just how brutal is the fall of MAGA going to be? Because I want to know if it's going to be enough to give Joe Biden a mandate to get some real change through. Which I mean, a big concern for me is when the child tax credit went through, it cut child poverty in half. It was a big success for working families. It was a big success for Democrats because it was Democrats who designed the policy. It was supposed to be the start of tackling not only the pandemic economic instability, pandemic-related economic instability, but also supposed to be the first step in tackling issues like childhood poverty. And then the Republicans undercut it, voted against it, and shrunk it down to pre-pandemic support levels. And therefore, the gains that we got when it came to the reductions of child poverty fell back. But most people don't know all the history of the child tax credit, and all they know is Joe Biden president, and then I stopped getting tax credit. And I have the fear that if we don't have substantive change, not only will it be a substantive, long-lasting change under the Biden administration, that it's just going to go back into the cycle of, the Democrats didn't give me anything, so just go back to Republicans. And then, the Republicans didn't give me anything, then go back to the Democrats, the cycle.
Yeah. No, I feel you. And I think that the concern is in the Senate because, like I said, 50-50 right now with Manchin dropping out. And the only gains we can make are to flip Texas with Ted Cruz or Rick Scott in Florida. If you ask me, I think Rick Scott in Florida is a maybe. Ted Cruz a little harder. The idea of Texas going blue statewide seems we're not there yet. So maybe we can end up with 50-50 or 51. And that's going to be, for me, the tough part because it's going to be hard to get stuff through the Senate unless you get rid of the filibuster. We don't have enough progressive John Fettermans yet to get rid of the filibuster. So I do agree. And I think even if we win the House, which I think we could win we could get like a 20-30 seat majority. What the Republicans did was pathetic with their 5-seat majority. But if we have the White House, a 20-seat lead in the House, but we only have a 50-50 split Senate, we're going to run into the same problems.
Yeah, I think your analysis sounds good. I'm worried that we're going to have the same problem that I think there's a good chance that we're going to be just like we were in 2021 in the Biden administration, where we had that slight majority, which meant we were able to get a certain amount of stuff through, which was still impressive considering how small the majority we had, but it's not going to be expansive enough for people to really feel that their lives have changed on a substantive enough level to motivate them to come out for Joe Biden again, or Joe Biden's predecessor who's going to try to build upon those successes, which feels like a big one of the big issues with trying to campaign for Joe Biden right now.
Well, we got to keep pushing, and people have to realize that it's more than just the presidency. It's about stacking senators, and it's about getting a bigger lead in the House. But if we have the Senate, the House, and the White House, we can do more budget reconciliation, like the Inflation Reduction Act with the climate provisions and the Medicare pricing and negotiating and, all that stuff. So there are some good things we can do, even if we just have all three chambers with a small majority. But yeah, I agree. People aren't going to see some gigantic changes. Even if we were to kick out Ted Cruz and Rick Scott, we still would only have 52 seats in the Senate. So it's not like we can just do whatever we want. But I do think the momentum's building. I think that this could be the beginning of the end of MAGA, with Trump losing and some MAGA people getting kicked out of the House, and like George Santos getting booted.
So if I'm painting that picture in my head, Trump election day loses, doesn't do very well, maybe even worse than last time.
Right.
What does a post-Trump Republican Party look like, and how do they get there? Because I don't necessarily think it's going to be Trump politely bows out and just rides off into the sunset like a defeated cowboy to retire. I think it's going to be kicking and screaming, and it's going to say he won and that it was faked again, and then there's going to have to be somebody to come out there with a cold bucket of water and dump it on the face of the Republican Party and say, look, this is the second time in a row now. Are you ready to have this guy drag us on a third round of this nonsense? Or, and that doesn't even necessarily mean like a third Republican presidential nomination for Donald Trump. Concentrating on the big steal going into 2026. Concentrating on a lot of the asinine nonsense that he concentrates on, a lot of the behavior that he engages in, just the character flaws that he has that makes him like an unreliable candidate, an unreliable statesman, everything. There's going to have to be somebody to do that. And whoever is the first to do that is going to be the one that carries the greatest amount of political risk. So I don't know who is going to do that. Like the first candidates in my mind that I think of is going to be people like, I don't know, like Nikki Haley or figures that have been doing it for the longest time. And that's what I kind of think that part of this Nikki Haley run is. I don't necessarily think Nikki Haley really believes she has a great chance of winning. Maybe if Trump gets like arrested and they say, Trump, you're guilty of crimes A, B, and C, you know the drill, you've been to so many court cases, then maybe. But I think a lot of this is setting up for the post-Trump Republican Party. And once Trump goes down, I think Nikki Haley is going to be one of the first people that is going to kind of jump out of it and say, here is the future of the Republican Party. And I think that's another thing Ron DeSantis is now trying to set up for, since he probably also knows he's not going to be the nominee this year.
Yeah, no, Nikki Haley's got the momentum. I actually think it's closer than people realize in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina, the first couple of states. The early voting state polls are much closer. It's like Trump within 20, 25, 30 points of the guys, as opposed to like 60 in the national polls, because those people are paying attention. They're voting soon.
Yes.
And like the Koch brothers, I know there's only one, but I just say the Koch brothers, they are putting their money behind her now. So as far as somebody being the future of the party, I think MAGA is still going to exist. I don't think MAGA is going anywhere for a while. It's going to go a few more election cycles.
Do you think it's going to be like the Liberty Caucus or the Freedom Caucus? Do you think it's going to be like the Tea Party? I doubt it could ever completely go away.
No, it's not going to go away. But look at the Tea Party. That thing died within 6 years.
It evolved,
that was 2010
a lot into like the Freedom Caucus.
Sure. But it was the dominant thing, and now it's kind of in the background. But I think it'll last a couple election cycles. But here's the thing. I think abortion is going to dominate for the next few election cycles at least, because it's down to the states. And so you hear like Nikki Haley saying, listen, we have to be realistic.
That's going to be a gigantic motivator.
Yeah, for sure. For years, for future elections, like multiple elections. And so I think MAGA's going to have to kind of come back to reality on that. And that's going to kind of give them problems and grief. But that's where I think MAGA is going to start to moderate a bit on abortion, and that's going to start to pull them back a little to the middle. But I think the future of the Republican Party after Trump is Nikki Haley, and she's pretty MAGA. But the problem for Nikki Haley is she's a brown woman, And I don't think the Republican Party is ready for a brown woman to be their leader.
Yeah, and it also seems to be that Nikki Haley is just generally not liked by the base of the Republican Party right now. And when I say the base, I mean the MAGA base. For a lot of her foreign policy beliefs, she seems to espouse a much more Reagan-esque foreign policy than many of the other people are willing to on stage. And a lot of it I disagree with because I am not a Ronald Reagan fan. But it is.
What?
No, I'm not a huge fan of Reagan.
I'm kidding.
But I will say that it is fun to watch her bop Vivek Ramaswamy on the head every once in a while. And so I do appreciate that.
She's been a lot of fun to watch. This is a great segue